What the hell is beyond failure? How do we even contextualize that? What was the study? What did it find? Tell us the story.
We have something called volitional failure, which usually means that the person believes that they couldn't do another rep with good form. And then you have true concentric failure, true concentric task failure, which is somewhat of a corollary to form failure. And the reason why I say that that gets a little bit murky is that depending on the degrees of freedom that you allow for the individual, concentric failure and form failure really mean the same thing. Because let's say you're doing a bicep curl. If you were to keep strict form the whole time, you would just fail right about here and then go down. But if you allowed the person to do a whole bunch of swinging and so on, they've really failed. The task
is get this to this. You got Olympic weightlifting shit going on.
Exactly.
I don't love that definition of failure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think using the form which was prescribed and saying concentric failure is a lot more consistent.
Yes. And we don't care where in concentric failure. If you cannot complete the next repetition, you're done.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So, and then just generally speaking, so I can paint the picture for this beyond failure, generally speaking, you can keep a few reps in reserve, 1, 2, and get similar amounts. So a recent study, Rafalo and colleagues did a really good job of elegantly showing this. Really did leg press, leg extension within subject design. The leg press was 2 reps in reserve, so 2 reps from failure. Leg extension, 1 rep in reserve. Other leg went to failure. No differences between groups. Generally, the literature points this way.
Yes.
So now this study comes along, and I'll describe the design. They did also within subject design. These were untrained subjects, and it was a calf raise. So they had 1 leg do calf raises to task failure, and so generally that's at the top. So if you can't reach the top of a calf raise, you're done.
The annoying lockout portion.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part of a calf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the other group, which they called the dorsiflexion failure group, which basically just means that they kept going until they literally couldn't move the load. So let's say you're doing a calf raise, you're doing a calf raise, you're doing a calf raise, you can't reach the top anymore.
Yeah.
You start doing that, and then you're at the bottom and you can't move at all.
Okay, so another way to define it is group 1 could not complete a concentric repetition. Group 2 went so much further, they couldn't start a concentric repetition.
Exactly.
You've gone to super failure, especially on like lengthened machines. Someone's like, do more flies. And you're like,
you're done.
And they're like, try harder. You're like, you don't understand. Try harder doesn't mean I get to here and then quit. This is it.
Exactly.
Yikes. What a painful study to put people through. Do you think the Vanderbilts are there? It's great. All right. What do they find?
More growth in the beyond failure condition, which going back to the literature on failure, people lost their minds. They're like, wait, if you can get similar growth from failure versus non-failure training, what the heck is going on here? They went well beyond failure. Well, I think there's 2 considerations there. One is considering the position. So you have the top of a calf raise where you fail, and then you have the other group, which was accumulating a whole lot of hypertrophic volume in that more stretch position. And we actually have
many more reps in that stretch position.
Many more, yeah.
If you assume that the bottom third, which I think is reasonable based on all the studies now, but the bottom third of the rep does a much bigger proportion of the total growth stimulus. If you add 5 bottom third reps to a set, that's like the equivalent of 3 or 4 more reps total. And if you add 8, that's like 6 more reps. That's a very different amount of total volume at that point.
Yeah. So the 2 considerations there that I think people had a hard time conceptualizing is 1, you're accumulating more volume in a more hypertrophic position.
Much more volume.
You're accumulating much more volume to the point where I would consider this more of an intensity technique than I even would consider it something like a straight set. It's just a completely different concept. Over time, if you lost 1 rep here or there by leaving a few reps in reserve, your total volume load is usually fairly similar because of the fact that you're more fatigued for the next set and so on, where it kind of all washes out. But in this context, it's much, much different. It's more similar to a drop set, where if you did, 3 drop sets, the accumulation of stimulus is just different.
And so it's a combo of 2 things. One is much more volume, but also it's much more volume at the most growth promoting end of the range of motion.